You received a call from an inmate at the Department of Corrections. This call will be recorded and monitored. If you wish to block any future calls of this nature, dial 7 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. To decline this call, hang up.
Well, hello there, Miss Gray. How are you this wonderful, wonderful day? Ah, yes, I've been hearing quite a few reports on illegal drugs roaming around in those prisons. It's a shocker, isn't it? I mean, my God, illegal drugs inside of a prison. Who would have thought something like that even possible? I know, I know. They're not really keeping anybody safe. They're just moving people from one toxic environment into another. And it's something us reformists are just adamant about. We've got to put prisons back to their intended purposes. And that's not only to keep us away from the crime, but also to keep them away from the crime. Oh, wow. Well, was she trying to commit suicide? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was actually having a discussion about that not long ago. The people, they haven't had drugs in such a long time, and then when they get the urge for one and get a hold of some heroin or something, then suddenly the dose that they're used to taking is too much. And you don't really know what it's been cut with. It could not be very let's say safe. But there's a lot of drugs out here that are being disguised. And I know there's a lot of knockoffs out there as well. And with the FDA on approved foods, it's being inspected and it has proper ingredients in there. But there's nobody to monitor the illegal drugs out there. And if they're taking prescription drugs and trading them off for stuff, yeah, they can get hurt on that too. Well, I hope so. I hope we can get the word out and let people know that even though these folks did commit a crime, and many of them committed the crimes against the people that are voting against them, but even though they're locked away, it doesn't mean that we can take away their rights. They have a right to be in a safe and secure environment. And I don't know of any penal system in the United States, probably even in the world, that claims they don't protect the safety and security of the people who are locked inside the prisons. I mean, who's going to go out there and say our prison is good, but we can't protect the inmates? So they took her to an outside hospital this morning for an overdose. Wow. And that's not something you expect to hear. We hear it out here in the outs, but yeah, I know. There's it. Well, I certainly haven't heard of it
You have
happening
60 seconds remaining.
every day, but I do hear of it happening once in a while, and it's almost as if a person has you could advertise a bad road, and then somebody has to die before anybody does anything about it, and that's kind of like what's going on in there. If people were dying every day, the public might even look into it, but it's not enough. It's not worth it for them. Well, yeah, at least your family, your loved ones care about you and they're going to look in on you.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
It is. It is tough to get anybody to have any compassion for anybody locked up. And one thing we need to emphasize, not everybody in prison is guilty, and not everybody in prison is violent and destructive and willing to keep repeating it. Okay, you got it. You take care of yourself and you say hi to your daughter for me. Good. Thanks for the call. Enjoy your day the best you can. Welcome to AQS Inmate Call. I am your host, Joel Wilborn, and this is a phone call based on real life events, which is what I like to emphasize and which I like to do. Something to let you know that things that go on inside the prison are usually relayed to the outside world through loved ones. I go on Twitter and there's loved ones on there that talk about their incarcerated loved ones who aren't getting the proper medical treatment they should be getting, or they're attempting to get an appeal process going and they're being set back. Things that don't make the news because they're not important. You know, and it's tough to pick the big news items, because I was a news editor at one time, and you can have 100 of them roll across your desk and can only pick 2 or 3, and you know, something that isn't directly affecting the community. But during an election, if crime becomes a big issue and people are concerned about the rising crime rate in their neighborhood, little bitty things that come out of the prison, especially about the condition of the prisoners, might not be that big of a concern. We could be banging the drum saying that prisoners are being locked in their cells for 12 to 15 hours a day with no sunlight and no radio or books. And we could say we need to improve prison conditions, and then of course people are going to say crime is on the rise and we can't have a happy prisoner in a happy prison. They did it to themselves. And it's really tough to get any compassion on something like that. And this is something that's been going on for dozens of years, quite a while, decades. And once in a while it'll come up into the news, especially when the big issue is a major shift in the weather, or there's some kind of need to get funding to build a new stadium or something. And then maybe you could squeeze in something that's going on in the prison because people aren't overly concerned about finding criminals, locking them up, and basically just leaving them to rot away for the remainder of their life. And we have to at least keep this out. And social media is a good way every once in a while, especially people who are backing somebody that's innocent. And they're just broadcasting anything that they can. And a person in prison, someone who's locked up behind bars, going to the hospital because of a drug overdose, that mirrors what's going on in the outside world. That happens so often inside the prison and out that it doesn't make the news anymore. I remember years ago hearing that the number one best-selling book is the Bible. And it's been the number one best-selling book for years. So much so that most of the best-selling books are number 2 behind the Bible. So the Bible isn't even listed on the bestseller list anymore. You don't see a Bible, as a 10th bestseller or something like that. It's just not there because it's always number one. Everybody's buying Bibles. And when it comes to events that's going on out there, there's so many overdoses, so many drug crimes. It's getting to the point where you're guaranteed a news item if your topic is illegal drugs. You can relate it to illegal crossing of the border. You can lead it back to customs, law enforcement, people who are depressed. Maybe a family member died and they turn to drugs, or a celebrity falls off the wagon or is found unresponsive in a hotel room. You can link so many different stories to illegal drugs, and it's just gotten to the point where what are we going to talk about today? Oh, drugs. You want something new, and if a person goes to a school and let's say tries to break into that school to cause damage, maybe kill some people or just be held up in there, and then you link that to this person's family is heavily into drug trafficking, that could make it an issue. But the same thing goes with guns. Guns, just like drugs, cause a lot of death and destruction. You get rid of the guns, the death and destruction will still be there. It's just they'll find a different means. And it could be the drugs. Likewise, drugs are illegal. And look at it. You can make guns illegal. Same thing. You can't really separate the two. Illegal activity is illegal activity, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you twist it or spin it. It's still something that's very dangerous to society. And we can't take it all on at once. I believe illegal drug activity is more dangerous than weapons, especially since a lot of shootings are a result of illegal drugs. And when I joined the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, my number one priority was to get drugs off the street. I wanted to fight it. And I was in a sheriff's office one time, and there was a cartoon tacked to the wall, and it was a image of a police officer attacking some flies. There were just flies all around this person, and the officer had 2 fly swatters and was just swinging and hitting a few flies, but the flies were just overwhelming, and the flies represented drug activity, illegal drugs. And seeing that, I kind of thought, yeah, and I can see how that's a good depiction of the fight against illegal drugs, because no matter how hard I worked, they were still flowing in. They weren't going anywhere, and they weren't slowing down. So after talking to people who were dealing in the drugs and people who were using the drugs, I found that there were different ways to fight it. And one of them is to try to find the cause. What is causing these people to get into the drug deal? And I was dating a person who was heavily into drugs. She used drugs, she sold drugs. And when she got out, I said, we need to work on you getting away from using drugs. Now, she was using them while she was in prison. She was going to be using them when she got out. But she had somebody that was motivating her behind her, and I was doing the best I can to keep her away from the drugs. And she said, well, as long as I'm busy, I don't think about that. So we would think about getting her 2 or 3 jobs, volunteer work, something just to keep her going until she went to sleep. And people are awake on average like 16 hours. And so you can keep her busy for 16 hours, you're doing okay. Now, she fell with the wrong crowd, and not much I could do for her now. But at the time, I did learn a lot, and it's more like, there's so many jobs available out there. Why are you going back to the drugs? And she said, well, dealing in drugs, I know. I'm experienced with that. And I make quick money. And that's the general consensus. Because when you're out here in society and it gets overwhelming, and we're all having our own issues. A lot of people have financial issues. And if your number one skill is drug trafficking, and it's a guaranteed quick money to help pay the rent, make your car payment, buy gas, then it's easy to get into that. They're not thinking about going back to prison, and if they did, they could still deal with the drugs. So I look at it like this. If they can get into prison and not get a hold of the drugs, a drug addict would really go out of their way not to go to prison, because they know they would be dry. And if they got in there for 4 or 5 years, there would be no way to get the drugs. But to get out there and say, I'm going to take a chance, get this money, if I get caught, I can still deal, I can still use. Now, when I would visit my girlfriend here, I went through a metal detector, and I'd take off my shoes and my belt, coat, anything I could take off, and it went through a scanner. And then I went in to visit, and after the visit, she'd be taken back and strip searched. And that's understandable, because she was in there for drugs. But what really got me, though, was that there was, we're not the issue here. When the pandemic came, visitation stopped, but the drug activity was still going on in there. So if you're going to be really strict on checking us out, we could go through and get strip search. We could go through and have dogs check us out. They could go through a lot of, they could really do a lot to keep the drugs out. But if you're going to do that with the visitors, you need to do that with the staff as well. Most of the drugs get in there through the staff. I've seen people mail them. I've seen people coax, bribe, manipulate staff members. And I've seen visitors. When I talk with family members and with people who are released, it's easy, very easy to find out how the contraband's getting in there. When I would send email to my friends in prison, some of them were blocked, and they would call it contraband. So if I would send a picture, like let's say a woman wanted a picture of her daughter, and this did happen, and their kids were holding guns, they would say, oh, no, you can't have this. And so it was considered contraband, and it was blocked. Now, if it's against policy, I don't mind. If it's against the law, I don't mind. Block it. But there was a woman, she got on Twitter, and she said she had some pajamas she got for Christmas, and she wanted to send her husband a picture of the pajamas. So she stood in front of the camera, and she was just doing a little booty shot. She just had her back to the camera, and she's looking over her shoulder. But they said that was illegal, and she put the picture on Twitter and said, how could this be illegal? And you can see more risque pictures in a catalog than that. It was just a woman showing the backside of her in her pajamas, and the pajamas were flannel pajamas, so it showed no skin. I didn't see anything sexual about it. I didn't see anything on, any pattern or anything in the background. It was just, I looked at it, I saw nothing. And a lot of the comments were, I don't see anything wrong with that. They're just being jerks, or being straight. So I'm sure she could appeal that and win. But at least they're looking. And that's what us reformists want. We want people to look at these things. And so when they were talking about keeping prisons safe, I would come up and say, I sent contraband. And of course, they would twist that. It's like, oh, you admitted to sending contraband. Well, there's two types of contraband. There's the illegal contraband, and then there's a contraband like photographs and letters and sticks of bubble gum. Something that isn't going to cause any harm, but it's still something they don't want inside the prison. And if you don't distinguish, I think they should give them completely different names. Because I was really confused about what contraband really is. A cell phone is contraband, a pistol is contraband, heroin is contraband, a photograph is contraband, a packet of coffee is contraband, because it's something that's not supposed to be in the prison. But they separate the two. So if I say, yes, I've sent contraband in there, my follow-up on there was, I don't send anything to that prison, and it doesn't get into the hands of any of the inmates unless you approve it. Because I can't give a third-party letter to an inmate. And they can't say, you sent the third-party letter. You gave the third-party letter to the inmate. You're supposed to stop it. That's contraband. You gave this inappropriate picture to the inmate. That was your fault. That's on you. And to twist that, to say this activity is my fault when they're supposed to be watching this, I don't think any of the people who participated in this were reprimanded, because whoever gave the contraband to the inmate is the guilty party. Their job is to keep it out. And we need to push that. Make sure they keep it out. Make sure they follow their policy. So I think prisons can keep all contraband out by stepping up. If they go out, if you hear a superintendent or a commissioner brag about keeping safety as a priority, then they need to be strip searching everybody who walks through those doors. Nobody should be allowed into the general population of the prison without being strip searched, without having drug tests done, maybe even have drug detecting dogs or something there. Yeah, we have rights, but that prison, they strip everybody of their rights. There's limited rights in there. When I went in to visit, my rights were stripped. There were rights that I didn't have. And that's basic American constitutional policy. We have the right to speech, but we can't go around threatening people to the point where they don't want to come outside. I have a right to call you evil, and I have a right to tell you that I'm going to kill you. No. That's a limitation to these rights. Not all rights are just open and you can do whatever you want. Yes, I have a right to carry a weapon, but I don't have a right to carry it into a prison. And drugs shouldn't be going in there either. And if you can't detect drugs by just looking at the person, then you need to search. And they need to put up signs. Your purses, your handbags, your backpacks are subject to search if you want to come into this facility. If you want to go in there, play by the rules. If you want to work in there, play by the rules. I don't think we need to be having a bunch of prisons out there. And if people aren't willing to play by the rules 100%, then don't be sending people to prison. If you can't hire people who aren't willing to be strip searched every day they walk in there, then why hire people to do the prisons? Why have the prisons? And so, if anybody can keep drugs out, it's a prison. If anybody who can keep disease out, like a pandemic, it's a prison. But they're just so lax. The rules apply to the prisoners who aren't doing anything, but they don't apply to the people who work there. Counselors, guards, contractors, all these people can bring things in. I would go to visit, walk through the metal detector, and the guards would walk right around it. They would just wave in their uniform and walk inside, and nothing was done. And then they're telling us that they're doing everything they can to keep the drugs out. No, they're not. And that needs to be emphasized every single day. We can't stop. They're hypocritical, and we need to stop this hypocrisy. So there's my 2 cents right there. Thanks for tuning in. And please tune into my YouTube channel. Listen to some of the interviews. Hear directly from people who are locked in there what's going on. There's a lot of rights that aren't given up when the people go to prison, and we need to stick by that. So go out, have yourself a wonderful day, and make beautiful memories for tomorrow.